The hotel lobby was a spectacle of wealth and grandeur, gleaming with marble floors and crystal chandeliers that bathed the room in golden light. Guests moved about in tailored suits and designer dresses, their laughter echoing softly against the walls. Amidst the symphony of luxury and privilege stood a lone figure, dressed in a simple janitor's uniform, mop in hand, head slightly bowed. She moved quietly, almost invisibly, as though she were part of the decor, someone no one noticed unless she was in their way. Her name tag read Maria, and to anyone who looked, she seemed like another underpaid worker keeping the opulence spotless. But beneath that humble disguise was a woman far more dangerous than anyone in that lobby could imagine. She was Agent Cassandra Holt, a seasoned CIA operative embedded undercover for a mission that demanded absolute secrecy. Cassandra had been working this cover for nearly 2 weeks, carefully observing her target, a self-proclaimed millionaire named Victor Langford. On the surface, Langford was a successful real estate tycoon with an empire that stretched across continents. But her intelligence indicated otherwise. He was suspected of laundering money through shell companies and had deep connections to an international arms syndicate. The CIA needed concrete evidence, and Cassandra's mission was to gather it discreetly without alerting him. Every night, she watched from the shadows as he met with investors, foreign diplomats, and shady middlemen in that very lobby. She had planted tiny surveillance devices and potted plants, smoke detectors, and even under a marble counter. No one suspected the janitor sweeping the floors could dismantle their lives with a single premed encrypted transmission. That morning, Victor Langford strutted through the lobby like he owned not just the hotel, but the world itself. His sharp navy suit gleamed under the light, and his expensive watch flashed every time he adjusted his cufflinks. 2 bodyguards followed close behind, their expressions stone cold. He was on his phone, barking orders, dismissing people with casual cruelty. Cassandra was mopping near the entrance, quietly eavesdropping while pretending to scrub the floor. She caught fragments of his conversation, mentions of shipments, documents, and clearance. By midnight, it was enough to make her pulse quicken. She needed more context, but she had to remain invisible. She deliberately turned her back, letting the mop glide slowly across the polished floor as she activated the small recording device hidden in her sleeve. But fate has a way of disrupting even the best-laid plans. As Langford walked past her, his expensive Italian loafers hit a wet patch she hadn't had time to dry. He stumbled slightly, catching himself on the counter, and his face twisted in fury. The phone slammed shut. All eyes in the lobby turned toward the scene. Cassandra looked up, feigning guilt, ready to apologize. But before she could speak, his hand came across her face with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. Gasps filled the air. The sound froze everyone in place. Langford's voice rose, dripping with venom and entitlement, as he shouted about incompetence and carelessness. "Do you know who I am?" he barked, his face red with anger. "You could have ruined $1 million deal because you can't even mop properly." The blow hadn't hurt her much, but the humiliation cut deep. Years of fieldwork had taught her to endure far worse without reaction. But this public degradation was a different kind of test. Inside her mind, the trained operative assessed every angle, every witness, every camera. She could take him down right there, twist his arm, and have him in cuffs within seconds. But her cover would be blown, her mission compromised, and months of intelligence work wasted. So she stood still, lowering her gaze, allowing him to believe she was nothing more than a powerless worker beneath his notice. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the effort it took to suppress her instinct. Around them, whispers spread like wildfire. The front desk clerk looked horrified, a bellhop shifted uneasily, and a few guests began recording discreetly with their phones. Langford smirked, satisfied with his display of dominance. "Clean it up," he said coldly, tossing a handkerchief at her feet before striding away, his entourage following like shadows. Cassandra straightened slowly, her cheeks still stinging, but her eyes burned with quiet resolve. That single slap had done something he couldn't possibly understand. It had sealed his fate, not because it hurt her pride, but because it gave her the perfect reason to escalate her operation without suspicion. She now had public evidence of his arrogance and cruelty, and she could use it to manipulate the narrative when the time came. Every move he made from that moment on would be under microscopic scrutiny. As the commotion died down, Cassandra retreated to the service corridor, her calm mask cracking just enough to reveal the cold focus beneath. She removed her earpiece, whispered into it, and reported the incident to her handler in coded language. The slap wasn't just a personal insult, it was leverage. It gave her the authority to move closer to her target. Within hours, she planned to position herself in his private suite under the pretext of cleaning up a spill. There, she could access his briefcase, retrieve the encrypted flash drive she had seen him guarding, and finally expose the money trail connecting him to arms dealers in Eastern Europe. Every step would have to be perfect. One wrong move, and the mission could implode. Meanwhile, the hotel staff buzzed with gossip. Some condemned Langford's behavior, others shrugged it off as something rich people could get away with. None of them knew that the woman they pitied had clearance levels higher than their country's president. Cassandra wiped her cheek once more, her mind already racing with tactical precision. She wasn't just going to complete her mission, she was going to make sure that when Langford fell, he would never rise again. The slap had given her motive, cover, and emotional momentum. Her calm demeanor as she returned to her duties masked the storm brewing inside her. By late afternoon, Langford was back in the lobby, laughing with investors, completely oblivious to the storm he had unleashed. Cassandra passed nearby, her expression blank, her mop gliding effortlessly across the marble once more. But this time, the reflection on the polished surface wasn't just of chandeliers and gold hidden within. The sheen was a tiny micro-drone recording every word from Langford's lips. The game had shifted, and he didn't even know he was playing against someone far more dangerous than any of his rivals, in the boardroom or the black market. The tension in the air after the incident lingered like a storm waiting to break. Cassandra Holt, still in her janitor's disguise, retreated into the staff hallway, her mind operating at lightning speed. She knew that Victor Langford's arrogance wasn't just an expression of power, it was a window into his recklessness. Men like him, who thought themselves untouchable, often left trails when they believed no one could hold them accountable. That slap, though humiliating in public, had done more for her mission than weeks of quiet surveillance. Now, she had the justification to dig deeper, to act with purpose, and to strike when the opportunity arose. She wasn't just a janitor anymore in Langford's eyes. She was invisible, beneath notice. And that invisibility was her weapon. She entered a small supply room and locked the door behind her. The faint hum of the ventilation masked her voice as she activated the encrypted comms device hidden inside her mop handle. Alpha 1 to command, she whispered, her tone steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Target engaged in open aggression. Proceeding to Phase 3. A brief pause followed, then a distorted voice replied with approval. She had the green light. The CIA had been tracking Langford for nearly a year, tracing millions in offshore accounts that linked back to weapons contracts in unstable regions. Cassandra's role was to get physical proof documents, recordings, anything that tied Langford directly to illicit trade. Later that evening, Langford returned to his penthouse suite on the top floor of the hotel, unaware that his actions were already triggering ripples beyond his comprehension. He was confident, even smug, replaying the earlier scene in his mind. The slap, to him, was a reminder that power meant never having to apologize. But what he didn't know was that Cassandra had used the distraction to gain access to the security feeds. She had slipped into the control room while staff were whispering about the altercation, her janitor's uniform granting her perfect camouflage. Within minutes, she cloned the data from the hotel's camera system onto a flash drive, giving her every angle of his movements for the last 48 hours. 9:47 p.m. She was outside Langford's suite, pushing her cleaning cart. The hall was quiet, lit by soft golden sconces. Her body language was calm, almost robotic, as she knocked lightly and announced herself. The door opened slightly. One of Langford's bodyguards appeared, a hulking man with suspicion written all over his face. "Maintenance," Cassandra said softly, holding up a fake work order on a clipboard. "There was a report of a spill from earlier, just need to take a quick look." The guard grunted, checked the paper, then waved her in without a word. Langford barely looked up from his phone when she entered. He sat at a glass desk, scrolling through encrypted emails, his voice low as he spoke to someone through a secure line. Cassandra moved methodically, pretending to mop near the minibar while scanning the room for her target. Langford's briefcase. She found it resting near the window, locked but not secured. Her heart rate quickened, but her face remained expressionless. She needed him distracted. Conveniently, he gave her the perfect opportunity. "Hey, janitor," he called without even glancing her way. "Make sure you don't mess up my carpet again." His voice dripped with the same arrogance as before. Cassandra murmured an apology, then moved closer to the desk, pretending to adjust a trash bin. From this position, her wrist device recorded everything his call. The screen's reflection in the mirror, and the snippets of coded language he spoke. Words like transfer authorization, shipment route, and contact in Marseille bled into her earpiece. Every phrase was another thread in the web she was spinning around him. When he finally ended the call, Langford stood and poured himself a drink. Cassandra seized the moment, subtly activating the micro-tool concealed in her mop handle. A faint hum filled the air as a wireless decryption spike connected to Langford's laptop across the room. Within seconds, her device began copying files from his system ledger's correspondence, transaction details. To any onlooker, she was just adjusting her equipment. But in reality, she was extracting the kind of evidence that could dismantle an entire criminal network. But then, a noise disrupted her rhythm. The door opened, and the second bodyguard entered, announcing a visitor. Langford turned sharply, and Cassandra knew she had seconds to cover her tracks. She powered down the spike, slid it into her sleeve, and returned to wiping the counter. Langford's visitor was a thin, sharp-faced man carrying a silver case. Cassandra's instinct screamed that this was the contact mentioned in the phone call. She kept her head down, sweeping slowly toward the far corner, angling herself to catch their reflections in the mirror. The man spoke softly but urgently, sliding a document across the table. "The port authorities are tightening inspections," he said. "We'll need new credentials for the next shipment." Langford's reply was laced with irritation. "Handle it." Money isn't a problem. I've paid for silence before. Cassandra's audio recorder caught every word. The mention of the port confirmed what her superiors had suspected. Langford wasn't just laundering money. He was facilitating illegal arms shipments through maritime routes disguised as humanitarian aid. Minutes later, the visitor left, and the guards followed to escort him out. That left Langford alone again, finishing his drink. Cassandra pretended to gather her supplies, inching toward the briefcase. The moment his attention turned to the balcony, she pulled out a micro camera and snapped a series of quick photos of the briefcase lock, the tag number, the encrypted USB inside, and the partially open folder on the desk. Every detail mattered. Her cover story as a janitor gave her only a short window before suspicion would set in. She turned to leave, but Langford's voice stopped her mid-step. "Wait," he said, eyeing her closely. "What's your name again?" Her pulse slowed deliberately. She had rehearsed every possibility, every risk. "Maria," she replied, forcing a timid smile. He studied her for a moment, then laughed. "Maria, try not to cause trouble next time. I'd hate to see you fired." He thought he was mocking her. He had no idea he was speaking to the woman who had just stolen the proof that would end his empire. Cassandra nodded, said nothing, and quietly slipped out. Once in the elevator, she exhaled, her composure breaking just enough to reveal the weight of what she had done. The flash drive concealed in her glove contained enough data to trigger international investigations. Back in her room in the service quarters, Cassandra locked the door and opened a secure laptop. She uploaded the files through a satellite connection, watching as lines of code encrypted and transmitted across the globe. Her mission was nearing completion, but she knew it wasn't over. Men like Langford didn't fall quietly. They clawed, bribed, and destroyed everything in their path when threatened. Tomorrow, when the world woke to headlines exposing him, he would realize that the woman he slapped wasn't a janitor or a nobody. She was the hand of justice he never saw coming, and by the time he understood, it would already be far too late. The lobby that had once echoed with the sound of a slap was now charged with whispers and tension. News of the incident had already spread beyond the hotel walls. Circulating on social media, in short, grainy clips recorded by bystanders, Victor Langford's name was being dragged across online platforms. His arrogance caught in a few seconds of footage that painted him as an elitist abuser of power. Yet the true storm brewing around him had nothing to do with viral outrage. In a few short hours, his world was about to collapse under the weight of secrets he never imagined anyone could uncover. The woman he had dismissed as a lowly janitor, the one whose face he had struck without hesitation, was no victim of circumstance. She was the force of consequence disguised as humility. And her mission was no longer just about intelligence gathering. It was about balance, exposure, and the raw satisfaction of justice taking form. In silence, Cassandra Holt had spent years perfecting the art of restraint. Her work as a CIA operative demanded control, patience, and a ruthless understanding of human behavior. She knew that men like Langford didn't crumble when confronted. They unraveled when they believed they were still in control. After securing the digital evidence from his suite, she began the next stage of her operation. Every step she took was part of a psychological chess game. Langford was confident, insulated by wealth, flattery, and the illusion that power could shield him from accountability. Cassandra intended to strip away that illusion piece by piece until he stood exposed. Not through violence, but through the unbearable weight of his own misdeeds. That morning, the lobby bustled again with life. Though the staff were quieter, more cautious, their gazes occasionally flicking toward Langford whenever he passed. He moved like nothing had happened, his phone pressed to his ear, his tone sharp and impatient. Yet behind his polished demeanor, irritation was beginning to grow. Anonymous calls were flooding his assistant's phone. Journalists were inquiring about a possible altercation, and investors were asking questions about his accounts. It was all part of Cassandra's plan. She had leaked just enough of his corruption through a hidden online channel to stir curiosity without exposing her role. The bait had been set. S. Langford argued with one of his legal advisors in the lounge. Cassandra was quietly in the hotel's security office again, her badge flashing staff maintenance. The guards barely acknowledged her presence as she moved through the corridors. Inside, the monitors displayed live feeds from every corner of the hotel. Her trained eyes scanned them with precision until she found what she was looking for. Langford's bodyguards meeting with a man she recognized from her earlier surveillance. They were exchanging a brown envelope, one that likely contained payment or instructions to move contraband. Cassandra captured the footage, isolated it, and transmitted it to her handler. The evidence was stacking fast, and now she needed to deliver the final blow. Langford's confession. That would require pressure, the kind that only fear could create. Cassandra understood that arrogance was a mask for insecurity. To crack him, she had to make him feel hunted. Using an encrypted tablet, she sent a message from an untraceable source directly to his private email. "You think no one sees what you hide, but the world is watching. Check the lobby." It was simple, vague, and enough to unsettle him. Moments later, she watched on the screen as he received the alert. His expression changed. Instantly confidence faltered. Suspicion flickered in his eyes. He looked around, scanning faces, trying to identify who had sent it. Cassandra smiled faintly. The first seed of paranoia had been planted. Over the next few hours, Langford's behavior began to unravel. He barked orders at his team, demanded to review surveillance footage, and accused employees of leaking information. The same hotel that had once been his stage of dominance now felt like a trap closing in around him. Cassandra moved silently through the hallways, observing his every move. Every outburst, every frantic call, added to the trail of evidence that painted him not as a powerful businessman, but as a desperate man hiding from the truth. When he finally retreated to his penthouse again, he was alone, his bodyguards dismissed under the pretense of privacy. That was her moment to move in. Under the cover of night, she accessed the maintenance elevator, using a master key. The penthouse floor was silent, except for the faint hum of air conditioning. She approached the suite door, placed a small audio bug under the frame, and retreated a few steps back into the shadows. Her earpiece crackled softly as she tuned in. Inside, Langford was pacing, muttering to himself, replaying phone calls, and cursing at his situation. Cassandra's voice remained steady as she whispered into her device, subject entering panic phase. Recording initiated, she knew what came next. Panic breeds mistakes, and mistakes breed confession. Hours passed as Langford's calls grew more frantic. He contacted his offshore accountant, demanding account transfers. He called his lawyer, shouting about hidden contracts. Cassandra captured every word. Each transmission she sent to the CIA data hub was another nail in the coffin of his empire. When he finally sat down, exhausted, his voice cracked. "They know," he muttered to himself. "Someone knows everything." Cassandra listened, her pulse steady, her face expressionless. She had seen men break before, but there was always a moment to shift when power turned to fear. She could hear it now in his trembling voice. The following morning, chaos erupted. Federal agents, acting on the intelligence Cassandra had gathered, descended upon Langford's suite. Hotel staff watched in stunned silence as men in suits and badges flooded the hallways. Langford, half-dressed and enraged, demanded to know what was happening. The lead agent stepped forward, reading him his rights, and Langford's defiance faltered. He looked around, searching for an explanation, for someone to blame. And then, across the lobby, his eyes found her. The janitor, the woman he had humiliated without a thought. She stood quietly near the elevator, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, their gazes locked. Realization dawned in his eyes, spreading slowly like poison. The truth hit him harder than any punishment could. He hadn't slapped a janitor that day. He had struck a federal agent, a highly trained CIA operative who had dismantled his life piece by piece, while he gloated in ignorance. His mouth opened, but no words came. The agents surrounded him, pushing him toward the exit as cameras flashed and reporters swarmed. Cassandra didn't move. She didn't need to. Her mission was complete, and justice had taken its form without a single bullet fired or a single shout exchanged. Das Langford was let out in handcuffs. The world finally saw him for what he was, a criminal masquerading as a tycoon, undone by his arrogance and cruelty. Cassandra turned away, her composure unbroken, her face calm. Around her, the hotel returned to its rhythm, staff whispering about the spectacle, guests pretending not to stare. The marble floors gleamed once again under the morning sun, and the mop in her hands reflected the light like a quiet symbol of power reclaimed in disguise. She moved methodically, erasing the last traces of chaos from the ground where it had begun. Each stroke of her mop a silent reminder that true justice doesn't always roar, it often works unseen, wrapped in patience, disguised as the powerless, waiting for the moment to reveal its hand.